Good morning and welcome to everybody to the launch of the National Skills to Compete campaign. This is Rachel Unruh, Communications Director for the Workforce Alliance. And I want to thank everybody for joining us for this exciting day. We're very happy to have so many people calling in from across the country from so many different arenas helping us launch this campaign for a 21st century skill guarantee. I'm really pleased to say that in addition to having 300 people register for this call, we've had over 125 organizations endorsing the campaign as of today, and we do expect that number to grow. And the campaign's endorsers are both state and national groups from business, labor, education, training, the public sector, from all different parts of the country. And you'll be able to see a list of them all on our new website, Skills2Compete.org, which went live this morning. And we're very happy to have representatives of our endorsers here to talk to us today. Now, I'd like to tell you about all the people we have speaking on today's call who are helping us to launch this campaign. First, we're going to hear from Andy Van Kleunen, Executive Director of the Workforce Alliance, and that's the organization that has envisioned the Skills to Compete campaign. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Harry Holzer, Professor of Public Policy at Georgetown University and a visiting fellow at the Urban Institute. And Harry is going to talk to us about the report that he and Robert Lerman have written for the Skills to Compete campaign. That's called America's Forgotten Middle Skill Jobs. And we're hoping that this research is going to help all of us make the case for universal access to skills and that it will inspire similar state-level labor market analyses. Next, we're going to hear from 4 representatives of the campaign's endorsing organizations, and they're going to respond to the report's findings and talk about why they have endorsed the campaign. From the National Association of Manufacturers, we have Phyllis Eisen, Senior Vice President of the Manufacturing Institute. From the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, we have International President R. Thomas Buffenbarger. From the Kentucky Community and Technical College System, we have Dr. Keith Bird, Chancellor. And from the National Body of Training, Inc., we have Elsa Bengal, who is a member of the National Board of Directors and Vice President of Boston YMCA Education and Training. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Andy Kleunen. Andy?
Thanks, Rachel. So first, let me also welcome everyone and thank you all for being on this call. And I also want to thank all the folks who couldn't join us today, but who have helped to develop this campaign intended to change our nation's political discussion about the skills of its people. I also want to thank the Joyce Foundation, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and the Ford Foundation for their support of the launch of this Skills to Compete campaign. We continue to appreciate their leadership on these issues. I want to take a moment first to acknowledge the day on which we're having this launch. So as you all know, today is Veterans Day. And it's an appropriate day for us to be talking about the need for the U.S. to recapture the kind of vision that drove our nation's economic policy in earlier eras. 60 years ago, in an effort to ensure that every returning World War II veteran had a chance at the American dream, President Franklin Roosevelt signed the original GI Bill, a guarantee that every veteran could get the education and training necessary to become a valued contributor in the nation's post-war economy. That GI Bill fostered major technological innovations that built post-war industries, and it provided opportunities for millions of Americans to create a new middle class. It was an historic initiative, and it's one that today's policymakers, including those running for president, often cite as a policy model. But the story often remembered about the GI Bill is really only part of the story. Political leaders often tout the fact that the GI Bill sent over 2 million veterans to college and graduate programs to become the professionals of the mid-20th century. But most forget that almost 3 times as many veterans, that's some 5.6 million people, used the GI Bill to enroll in vocational training for good skill jobs that would ultimately drive the engine of post-war industrial growth and bring countless American families into the new middle class. The GI Bill wasn't just about college for the few. It was about investing broadly in the skills of workers at all levels of the labor market, across a variety of occupations, firms, and industries. It wasn't just about the elites. It also paid attention to the majority of jobs that sit in the forgotten middle of the skilled labor market. That is, those jobs requiring more than a high school, but less than a 4-year degree. And it's those jobs and those workers that Skills to Compete wants to bring back into today's national policy debates. Just as one example of where things have been heading in Washington lately, recently Congress and the President authorized $42 billion to fund the COMPETES Act, which focuses in part on developing more American scientists, engineers, and mathematicians with 4-year and advanced degrees. Now, it's an important piece of legislation, but it only addressed training for a relatively small number of jobs and a relatively limited number of industries. At the same time, federal training programs that could prepare workers for middle-skill jobs in healthcare or precision manufacturing or construction just took a $245 million cut in funding, a reduction of almost 8% at the hands of the current Congress. So goes the skills conversation in Washington these days. Funding for the training of our elite innovators is going up, but we continue to disinvest in the already meager training programs demanded by the majority of U.S. workers. When we compare that to the GI Bill, it's clear that Washington has forgotten the comprehensive skills strategy of the past century. So we need to get back to that game plan. We need to build the rest of our workforce team. When newly trained medical researchers find cures for illnesses, we'll need an even larger number of lab and pharmacy techs and nurses to produce and administer those remedies. When newly trained computer engineers develop advanced means to produce goods, we'll need an even larger number of skilled manufacturing workers to harness and maintain this technology on evolving production and logistics platforms. So Skills to Compete is a call to action to remind our national policymakers about all of the skilled workers that we'll need in the 21st century global economy, whether they choose to pursue an apprenticeship, a vocational certificate, an associate's degree, or a PhD. It is why we're calling for a new broad-based skills guarantee for the entire U.S. workforce in the 21st century. Skills to Compete believes that every U.S. worker, both those entering the workforce as well as those who are already working, should have access to the equivalent of at least 2 years of education or training past high school, leading to a vocational credential, an industry certification, or one's first 2 years of college, to be pursued at whatever point and pace makes sense for individual workers and industries. Everyone must also have the opportunity to obtain the basic skills needed to pursue such an education. Now, this isn't a crazy idea. It certainly isn't any crazier than more than doubling the number of adults in college and post-secondary training as we did with the GI Bill. And today, other countries have already embraced similar goals. Ireland has become one of the richest countries in Europe, due in part to a national policy that guarantees the equivalent of an associate's degree for every worker. Here in the U.S., a number of states have started to advance proposals for guaranteed access of up to 2 years of post-secondary education or training. So a 2-year skills guarantee is not a crazy idea. It's just an idea that has to be put into the minds and platforms of our nation's policymakers. And that's what the Skills to Compete campaign is about, and I want to thank all of you who have helped us launch it today.